Our worship theme for this month is Journey. And I have so much and so little to say about it at the same time that I'm almost not sure what to do. I think any journey could be a sacred journey, so much so that this sermon could go on all day as I listed them. Holy people who've made their pilgrimages, the journeys of self-discovery everyone has undergone at some point or will. I don't have all day. And it's equally true that I could just say to you, look, everything's a journey, make it sacred, good luck, amen. And that is the point of this sermon, in case you have to leave early. But just FYI, we don't put out the cookies until 11. And so I was thinking that this might be a good, cozy, snowy Sunday to just hear a story instead of a sermon. It was the snowfall that we got this week, this historic snowfall, that made me want to tell you the story of the time the New Jersey State Police called my family during a blizzard because they thought I was dead. This is a true story. To spare you the suspense, I'm alive. One might even say I'm doing well. And there was an explanation, though not a good one. And the story goes like this. In January of 2016, so this was not that long ago, a Category 5 blizzard dropped 3 feet of snow on New Jersey in one day. And that's what reminded me of this story because of our historic snowfall. And a few days before the blizzard hit, so we're 3 days out from Snowpocalypse 2016, when everyone else was out stockpiling milk and bread and just buying up all the rock salt and snow shovels, getting fuel for their generators, all that kind of stuff, a state forest ranger in Wharton State Forest found my car abandoned in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. Now, abandoned is not the word I would have used. There's a whole lot of abandoned cars in the church parking lot right now, and no one has called the police. From my perspective, I had parked my car in the New Jersey Pine Barrens to hike the Batona Trail, which is a 50-mile trek through the heart of the pines. Now, the pines are an exceedingly weird place. As I said earlier, all the trees are exactly the same height because anytime one of them grows taller, it shades the trees underneath, and those trees will drop their needles. And the next time there's a lightning strike, they just burn the tall tree down. It's like pine tree revenge. So when you climb up the forest towers, the fire towers, you look out and it's like the top of the trees are like a knife's edge. And because of the sandy soil and the iron in the soil and the roots of the cedars, all the lakes are blood red. The lakes are blood red. Now, people go missing in the Pine Barrens every year for the stupidest of reasons. Because there are no hills, you can't climb up and get a good vantage point to find out where you are when you're lost. Everything looks exactly the same no matter where you are for 100 miles in any direction. And when people wander off the trail, they think they're lost, they wander off the trail. When you take 10 paces off the trail and turn around, the trail is gone. Because unlike out here where the trees are very big and there's space between them, there the trees are about this big, no more than a foot wide, but there's lots of them. And everywhere you look looks exactly the same. It's just tree trunks everywhere. And if you're out there when it rains, the sandy trails covered in pine needles will wash straight over overnight and disappear. Yes. And so I was out there hiking by myself in January in the snow on the Batona Trail, which is accessible only by foot. Now, I did not know about the blizzard that was coming because I was already in the woods, and I was being dumb. I had not checked the weather. I'm embarrassed to say that. And because it was January and there was already snow on the ground, a little bit of snow, it just seemed unlikely to this ranger that anyone would just be out there hiking when no one else was, when that's exactly what I was doing. I wanted to go hiking when no one else was there. And when the forest ranger looked inside my car to see if there was a body or something, she saw a tent and a sleeping bag still in the car, and became concerned, because whoever abandoned this car did not take their camping gear with them. The joke's on her. I have more than one tent and more than one sleeping bag. And very little storage space in my house. But that's when she called the state police to get in touch with my family, because for all she knew, I'd had some kind of emergency, abandoned the car on foot to go get help, and was now nowhere to be found. And if I was still alive, by her reasoning, by the time this blizzard was over, I would not still be that way. So the state police called my family to investigate before they sent out search and rescue. Now, my dear, loving parents had done everything in their parental power to discourage me from going out hiking in the snow. They brought up bears, falling trees. In fact, my mom made me promise not to put up my tent under any trees in case one of them fell down. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll try to find that spot in the state forest. They warned me about frostbite, about hunters, snowmobiles that might, not seeing my tent, run over it. Of all the places in the forest that they might ride their snowmobile, my tent would be the one. And they warned me, of all things, about slipping on ice, which happens everywhere. But it was especially a concern in the woods by myself. And at one point, my father had gestured to me sitting on their couch where I was sorting my gear before I left and yelled, "Can't you just stay there?" And I could have. It was an option, but I didn't want to, which is a metaphor for the average human life. I told them that I would probably be fine. I repeated this 100 times. I'll be fine. I'll probably be fine. Now, parents, does that comfort you? No. Probably is not good enough. But I told them that if I wasn't fine, they could trust me to find a way. They raised me to be resourceful, to think for myself. I would probably be fine, but if not, I would find a way, which is also a metaphor for the average human life. And with all that background, I wish I could have been there to hear my parents' end of the call when the state police got in touch with them, because after all their dire prophecies, they were then put in the position of having to go on the public record and admit to legal authorities that, yes, I was probably fine. They told the police that, yes, I had a bomb-proof wintertime tent, a sub-zero sleeping bag, extra food, extra fuel, a killer first aid kit with everything but crutches, and I was expected to get back to my car before the blizzard hit. That must have killed them, to admit all of that. Now, I found out about this phone call when I checked in with them. I reached Apple Pie Hill, which is the highest point in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. It's like 10 feet tall. So New Jersey's pretty flat. It's a coastal plain. And so I climbed the fire tower. It was freezing. The wind was blowing. I was shaking. And I got cell phone signal, and I called my mom and dad to let them know that I was fine. They told me about the blizzard, and I said, don't worry, I'll be back to my car before the blizzard hits. They told me about the police calling, and I laughed. They didn't. Then I hung up, and I said, I'll see you in a few days, and I climbed down from the fire tower. I got back on the trail. And as I was walking down the other side of Apple Pie Hill, I slipped on ice and sprained my ankle. Yeah, I know, I wasn't expecting it either, because I was dumb. And I'm sure that this point in the journey is also a metaphor for the average human life. But I'll let you write that sermon in your head. I'm almost too embarrassed to go into it. Now, this was bad for a number of non-metaphorical reasons. Reason number one is that I had, not 10 minutes earlier, assured all the relevant authorities that I was fine. And now I wasn't, but nobody was looking for me anymore. Gosh, I felt dumb. Number 2 is that I was running out of water. I had not brought enough water containers, and I had expected to reach what's called the Batona pump. It's a pump in the middle of the swamps that has fresh water. And now that my ankle was sprained, I couldn't get there by the time my water ran out. So much for all my careful plans. And the reason, number 3, that this was bad is that I had just been informed about an impending blizzard, promised everyone I'd be back to my car before it hit, and now I did not think that that was the case. And I wasn't even sure I was prepared for this blizzard. Number 4 is that my parents had been right all along. And despite being in my 30s, I suddenly felt like a 3-year-old who had wandered off at the grocery store, looked up, and suddenly realized with a sinking feeling in my stomach that all the grown-ups were gone, and I was alone. I mean, that's life. You'll probably be fine. This is what we could say to any new human born. You'll probably be fine. But when you're not, you'll try to find a way. It's what we do. And so I found a couple of pine branches to use as makeshift walking sticks. And I hopped away toward the pump. That's what I had to do. I couldn't get back up the hill. So my sole goal at this point was to get to the Batona pump and get water. And then I would figure out the rest once I got there, if I got there. And I kept hopping past dark. Now, even today, it's not clear to me if anyone has hopped the entirety of the 50-mile Batona Trail on one foot. But I did give it my best shot, which was not impressive. I kept hopping long after it became clear to me that I needed shelter, that the temperature was dropping fast. Now, the wind chill that night dropped down to 0, and I wound up staying, once I crawled into my tent, I wound up staying in my sleeping bag for 18 hours, waiting for the temperature to come back up. It just didn't seem safe, call me crazy, to be out there hopping around, propped up on branches, with like a cup of water left to my name, and no way of cooking my food. So I just stayed zipped up in my sleeping bag, which, while rated for survival, let me just say this, the sleeping bag was rated for survival down to like 20 degrees below 0. It was only comfy down to like 40 degrees above 0. Now I know. Now, if this were a movie, there'd be an intense montage of my 18-hour survival ordeal. But the truth is, it was cold, and it was boring, and I was thirsty, and my ankle hurt. It was perhaps the most peril I've ever been in, and I cannot recall a longer stretch of boredom in my life. I was so bored. I was so bored. It was so dull. I could not even take my hands out of my mittens to twiddle my thumbs. The tent didn't have windows because it was a winter tent, so I just laid there and looked at the top of the tent, meditating on how dumb I was. That's how I passed the time, bored, cold, and thinking about how dumb I was. How I could have just stayed on my parents' couch, which had been suggested to me. I thought about how I'd overestimated myself and my preparedness for this journey. How I'd underestimated the unexpected. How I missed my mom and dad. How I wanted to have made better decisions along the way. How my ankle still hurt. How I was still thirsty. Now I'm thirstier, very thirsty. Now, I wish I could say that the real journey all along was inside of myself, and that being trapped in that tent with my own thoughts caused me to undergo some sort of transformation, but I didn't get anywhere. It was really just so dull. So when the temperature the next day finally got up to 20 degrees, I crawled out of the tent, and sitting on the ground, I packed up everything as fast as I could. My whole focus was get to the Batona pump and get water. Now the sun was shining, and I saw that all the pine trees were dusted still with this fresh, powdery snow. And almost as soon as I got back on the trail, I stood up, I put on my pack, I grabbed my sticks. Just at that moment, a gust of wind hit the trees, and all the snow exploded off of them into the sunshine in this enormous cloud of sparkles all throughout the forest. And it was so cold that as the particles of ice settled on the ground, it just sounded like sand everywhere. I'd never heard a sound like that before. I tell you, I had a religious experience in that moment. I could have been delirious. maybe. Now, I told you that the trail was only accessible by foot, even if it's only 1 foot. And in that moment, I had a profound sense of being the only person there, the only person who had seen it. I had a sense of the necessity of being outside in those conditions in order to see it. It has to be very cold for the snow to be that crystalline. The necessity of having walked there overnight. The necessity of having stayed there overnight to wake up to the fresh, powdery snow. And I still think that someday when I'm on my deathbed, that cloud of sparkles will be one of the things I see. I don't know if having that experience made the previous 18 hours worth it. I'm not sure it works that way. That moment of beauty didn't make my ankle hurt less. It didn't make me less thirsty, but they were all tied together. Now, I don't know what I'd be saying now if I hadn't seen the ice sparkles. Maybe I would have found something else. Maybe I'd be telling you about the transcendent pine cone that I found that was just so perfect in its spirals. Maybe I was primed for that kind of experience. Maybe if I hadn't spent 18 hours bored to the brink of tears, I wouldn't have found anything significant in that moment at all. I don't know, that's life. That's life. Now, if you want to know whether or not I reached the water pump, I did. I did. Hopping on 1 foot not long after that. It wasn't that much further than where I made camp. And when I saw it, I laughed out loud, though there was no one there to hear it. It was triumphant. And my triumph quickly turned to bottomless despair when it turned out the pump was frozen. Now, my father had warned me about this too, about all manner of pump malfunctions. And so I boiled my last half cup of water to prime the pump, and it worked. The pump moved 2 inches and then froze again, and then I had no water. And so I spent hours crawling around, scooping up the inch of snow that was there with my mittens and boiling it, burning through half my fuel, and ultimately it tasted so much like boiled pine needles that I had to spit it out. And so I kept going. And when I reached the Batstow River, I sat down, I sank down to my knees in the frozen marsh grass with the ice crackling all around me, and drank the river water and cried. What makes water holy? If I hadn't been through what I'd been through, would I still think of the Batstow River today as holy? But haven't we all been through so much by the time we reach water? Haven't all of us been through so much? And isn't that why we have religious rituals? To mark out the strangenesses and the beauties and the inexplicabilities of the journey whenever we have occasion to ford the stream. And if you want to know whether I made it back to my car before the blizzard, I did not. That was impossible. And so as soon as I got cell phone signal back, I called my dad. He didn't say, "I told you so," to his credit. He met me at Batstow Village, where the trail crosses a road, and took me to my abandoned car. I can't tell you what it felt like to see him there. Later, I overheard him talking to one of my uncles on the phone at their house, and he was saying, "Oh, sure, the weather doesn't bother her." No, she was fine. She was totally fine. Snow and everything, yeah. She's got all the gear she needs. She can take care of herself. No, I wasn't worried. Like, you liar. And he left out the part about having to come rescue me. She can take care of herself. You know, I'm not sure that that's true. And I'm okay with that now. I stopped in the ranger station. Now, the state police, once they determined that I was probably fine, dropped the case and never called back the rangers. So when I showed up, the rangers had assumed that the state police were on it and that they had either been looking for me or had found a body. And when I walked in and told them who I was, I said, "I'm just here to pick up my car down the..." They all whipped around and looked at me like... The one ranger said, I was given a thorough talking to, and she said to me, "I'm a grandmother, you know. You can't do this to people. And we worry." And so I said sorry to Ranger Grandma and said I would never do it again. I had learned my lesson. Oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. And I did learn my lesson. There's a lot of lessons to be learned on any journey. Not all of them are worth it, but we don't get to choose sometimes. All of us are on our own journey, doing the best we can, making our own stupid mistakes. With the help of our elders, with the help of each other, with the help of random state police officers and rangers who are looking out for us, we can usually make it through. And sometimes we are that for each other. So this month, as we consider what it means to be a people of journey, remember, everyone here is on their own, sometimes stupid journey. You never know whether you're the stupid hiker or it's your turn to be the ranger. Amen.